Hello and welcome to Web Development 101 with Alex Merced. On this show, we'll talk about all the basic concepts of web development in a way that anyone can understand, whether it's front-end web development, back-end web development, and full-stack web development. If you're new to web development, I recommend listening from episode 1 to understand all the concepts from beginning to end. You can also learn more about my own personal projects over there at LearnWebDev.AlexmercedCoder.work.
Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from LearnWebDev.AlexMercedCoder.work, and on today's episode what I want to do is talk about functional programming on the web. So what if you're a fan of functional programming? Now what is functional programming? Now if you haven't gotten to my YouTube channel, I have a good video where I kind of talk about the 4 paradigms of programming and a lot of other really good stuff you should go check out. So just look up Alex Merced, full stack developer on YouTube. But what functional programming is the idea that, I guess the main focus, it's sort of a way of how you structure your programming code. And the idea is you focus on pure functions. Now what a pure function is, it's a function that takes input, doesn't modify the input. Okay, so the whole idea of immutability, meaning don't change it. So something that's immutable can never be changed. Something that's mutable can be changed. So you take input, you don't change it, and you put out output. And every time you do it, every time you take the same input, you're gonna get the same output, so it's predictable. And the benefit of this is you know what things do. Okay, I know that function's always gonna give me this result for this input. I don't have to worry about losing data that I have already because it doesn't mutate my existing data. It creates a whole new set of data. It's easy for me to bug fix because if something's not going right, then I can take a look at my data to see how it looks like at the end of the program and see if at any point it doesn't churn what I expected it. When that happens, that must mean the previous function must be where the bug is. So you're not necessarily creating classes that have, because in object-oriented programming, which is sort of the main paradigm, you're typically creating objects that have data. So I'm creating sort of an object for a bottle of water that may have an attribute of the amount of water in the bottle that will go up and down. So that variable mutates. And that object is constantly changing and doing things. So it's just a different way of thinking about what is your strategy to solving problems. And so that's functional. So there are actually programming languages that specialize in functional programming. So sort of in the grand scheme of sort of the classic languages, you have like Erlang, Haskell, Lisp as your functional languages. But there's versions of these languages that have been sort of built out specifically for web development or for just modern development in general. So some of the languages to point out in particular, Clojure seems to be getting a lot of sort of popularity lately. So Clojure is a big one. Elm, ELM, is another big one. Elixir and F#. Those are sort of the 4 big web development functional programming languages. So Clojure, Elm, Elixir, and F#. F# famously part of the .NET framework. So if you're a fan of like the whole Microsoft .NET framework and using that to create website backends, F# you can use that to do functional programming in .NET. And Elm has gotten a lot of discussion because from what I hear from lectures I've seen about Elm is that you can do a lot, and just in functional programming in general, you can do a lot with a very little bit of code. So always the joke is, or at least sort of like the functional development community, when you watch like sort of lectures at different functional programming conferences on YouTube, is always that, well, the reason why functional programming isn't popular is because there wouldn't be jobs, because functional programming is just that good that there wouldn't be a need for so many developers. So everyone just uses the less efficient programming languages because it means more developer jobs. That's probably not it. I saw a really good lecture from a Clojure conference where they talked about sort of why is object-oriented programming sort of the standard. And it was actually a really fascinating history of programming languages in general. I highly recommend watching it. I'll probably post that over there at LearnWebDev.AlexMercedCoder.work, my sort of place where I plop videos that are really cool regarding web development. But basically, it's just more coincidence, not any kind of concerted effort. Basically, what happened is that there was a language called Smalltalk, which is kind of like the original object-oriented language, and then that language ended up sort of really influencing C and Objective-C, and then there was those languages that ended up influencing a lot of the languages today. So C ended up turning into C++. Or actually, that's what happened. Smalltalk influenced C++, and Objective-C turns into Swift, which is what a lot of people use for iOS development nowadays. C++ Java ends up kind of targeting C++ developers when Java comes out, and Java spends this huge sort of $500 million on marketing. It's like the only language that ever actually became popular because they actively marketed the programming language. And then basically C# was Microsoft's response to Java, so they created that, and that was basically very similar to Java with, so basically because of this one object-oriented programming language kind of just was in the right place at the right time to inspire a few people in the way they designed their languages, and then those languages ended up becoming popular because of things they got used for. So C++ was really popular for systems development. Objective-C became really big with like Apple development, developing things for the Mac ecosystem. And so those had such a big place, and then other languages try to compete with them. And then one of the best ways to compete with somebody is to build something that's not hard to switch over to. So if you build a programming language that's like drastically different, like learning Lisp, Haskell, or Erlang is quite a different paradigm. I mean, it's a very different syntax. So that's why like a lot of these object-oriented programming languages are, one, object-oriented, but two, also have very similar syntax and similar concepts underlying how they work, because they were all kind of competing with each other, so they didn't want to be so different that it would be hard for people to switch over. So it was just kind of a coincidence. Could have been, a different language on the cover of whatever the magazine was that had Smalltalk on the cover that kind of resulted in Objective-C being so influenced by Smalltalk. But overall, it was a really interesting lecture. There's a lot more to it, but that was the basic thrust. That, the object-oriented dominance, when all things are looked at, is a coincidence in an interesting way. So with that, again, functional programming is a thing. I don't think it'd be a bad idea to pick up one of these, whether it's Elixir, Clojure, Elm, or F#. It's always good to have multiple tools under your tool belt as far as languages go. But functional programming is not something that you need a specific programming language for. Functional programming is already starting to influence things. Like if you take a look at React is hugely built around immutability and functional programming concepts. So technically, when you're using React, it's kind of like a small baby step into becoming a more full-throated, functional programmer in JavaScript. And so, yeah. Functional programming, it's a thing, and there are languages that focus on that. And from what I hear, they're pretty good for those who use them. They like them, so check them out. So my name is Alex Merced. You're listening to Web Development 101. I'll see you guys next week.